Hey guys, here we are back with another of your Mind Map Mastery lessons. Where are we today? We're at Module 3, Lesson 3, and we're continuing with the emotions, right? So this entire module really is about emotions. We've got a couple of small exercises mixed in, but really we're on the emotions. And we are on the 7th M of Mind Map, right? So this time we're going to be looking at part 2. We're going to be looking at the light side of the emotions, if you will. Whilst I explained there's no such thing as a negative emotion, you could say that the first 3 emotions we looked at were the dark side. This time we're going to look at the light side. So last time, where were we? We looked at the overall 7 primary emotions. We looked at, okay, here's my weird order again. We looked at seeking. No, we didn't look at seeking. We explained that seeking was there. We looked at rage, fear. Damn, this is all over the place. Let's just pop them all up so that we got them all there. Right. So I explained we have fear, panic, rage, seeking, care, lust, and play. Last time we looked at fear and panic and rage, and we understood that overall the general purpose of emotions was really quite simple. It was to tell us 2 things, and the first thing was the things that are going to support and increase our chances of survival. Okay, so do more of this because it'll be good for you. And it was also there to tell us the things that detract from and decrease our chance of survival. So, hey, stop doing that because that's going to lead you into all kinds of problems. It's going to be bad for you. Okay, so that's ultimately the overall purpose of emotion. So keep that in mind. Like every time you're dealing with an emotional person, whether it be the light side emotions or whether it be the dark side emotions, keep coming back to this very, very simple idea that there is a message being sent to the nervous system by the brain based upon what it's picking up from its sensory system, looking, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. Okay, is this going to increase my chance of survival or is it going to decrease it? If it's going to increase your chance of survival, it's going to make you feel better. If it's going to decrease your chance of survival, it's going to make you feel worse and you're going to experience what most people call the negative emotions. Okay, so really, really simple. So this time we're going to be looking at, like I said, we're going to be looking at the light side. Okay, so the light side emotions are caring, lust, and play. Okay, so these are the 3 primary emotions that we're going to look at on this side of the equation. So let's dive straight into care or caring as a primary emotion. So as you'll remember from our lessons on the anterior cingulate cortex, because that's what this emotion is all about, really, right? There are other brain centers, and we'll be covering them later, that have some aspect on this, like things like the insula and stuff, right? But let's just kind of keep our focus here at the moment. Remember that we had this discussion that all human babies, all mammals in fact, but especially human babies, are born pretty immature and vulnerable, and none more so than the human. Okay, so there are some mammals that are kind of get up and they're a bit rocky on their feet, but they're ready to go after some hours or some days, and they're able to perform basic functions like eating and walking and all kinds of stuff, right? Human babies are the most immature, the most vulnerable of all of the mammalian species. So we need a system that creates a bond between mother and baby so that mother sticks around for long enough to see the baby through to the point where it's able to take care of itself. Okay, so the caring system, emotional system, is designed to basically stimulate that mother-infant bond. Without it, mum would either potentially have the baby and say, wow, that was really painful, that was horrible, and I'm going to walk off and leave that horrible thing that just came out of me that was causing me so much pain, I'm just going to leave it here on the forest floor. Or she might say, wow, that was really, really tough, that was an extremely hard thing that I've just gone through, used up lots of energy, and end up eating a newborn. And clearly neither of those things are socially acceptable, but neither of those things are things that actually happen, right? So what happens is that basically mother is stimulated into wanting to take care of the baby from not just from the minute it's born, but from before it's born. And the baby is stimulated into wanting to maintain this connection with the mother, obviously in order to create food and safety and kind of safety from harm from the environment and from predators and such. Okay, so it's all about the ACC, really, right? The anterior cingulate cortex. And again, in a later lesson, it's a bit early at the moment, but in a later lesson, we're going to talk about a couple of other specialized brain areas that contribute to that. But for our understanding at this moment, the anterior cingulate cortex is a good enough place to be coming from. Okay, and so it's about the ACC and the hormone oxytocin. Okay, so the hormone oxytocin is basically promoted via the estrogen pathways to create the bonding that most of us would call love. Okay, so that deep parental bonding, that deep kind of mother to baby and father to baby bonding, and also the deep kind of partnership bonding, kind of husband and wife or kind of lovers kind of thing, right? So oxytocin is there and it's designed to create extreme social bonding. Okay, that's really what love is. Love is an extreme social bond. Okay, almost to the point where parents will often obviously lay down their lives for their offspring and things. Okay, so basically, the care and the caring pathway is essentially strengthened via the processing of tactile nurturance and mutual gazing. So what do I actually mean by that? Physical touch. So the more often mum touches baby, and again, you think about newborn mothers. What do they spend a lot of time doing? Stroking baby's head, stroking the cheek, kind of touching it, touching the body. Again, fathers do this too. I'm focusing on mothers at the moment, but obviously fathers have this same process going on, usually to a slightly lesser degree than mums. Really because of the different hormone pathways, but it doesn't mean that fathers don't love their babies in the same way, but it's hardwired into the mother. As part of an evolutionary process is much stronger in the mother. Okay, so physical touch. So there's a lot of physical touch leads to kind of the increase of the care emotion, both for mother and for baby. But so does mutual gazing. In other words, eyeball to eyeball, which is kind of interesting considering that when newborns are born, they don't really have much visual processing going on, but still kind of there's some hardwiring going on in baby's brain, and definitely some hardwiring going on in mum's brain that says, okay, because we're looking at each other and we're mutually gazing, the anterior cingulate cortex is firing up. It's getting all of its opioid needs met. Again, oxytocin is rushing in there. Safety is perceived. Remember, kind of, there are two ends to this spectrum. There's survive at one end, there's thrive at the other, right? So safety is perceived, and if safety is perceived, then we start to move toward the thrive end, which is where the love is, right? So care and caring is about love. It's initially about safety. Okay, so it's a very pragmatic, a very practical emotion first. It's like, am I safe? And the brain says, yep, you're safe. And it says, okay, well, who is the person around me that is creating the safety? And thank you very much. I will call this emotion love, right? We call it love. From a brain perspective, and from the kind of the research at the moment around emotions, this is the care emotion, the caring emotion. Okay, so what does it do? It promotes pro-social attitudes in children. So the more loved a child feels, in other words, the safer a child feels, the more physical contact a child receives, the more mutual gazing a child receives. They get a much stronger base for emotional maturation. In other words, they become emotionally safe. They're okay with expressing their full range of emotions. They're okay with extending themselves out to meeting new people and trying new things and extending their social, not only their social circle, but their physical circle, like how far they will range from mum and dad, how far they'll range from safety, is largely, to a very large degree, based upon how much physical contact and how much physical safety they've already felt from their parents. Okay, so clingier parents have clingier children have a tendency to come from, not always, but have a tendency to come from parents that have maybe had less physical contact and less mutual gazing. It's not always the case, and it's not so clear cut, but this is the general trend. Okay, so it promotes pro-social attitudes in children, increases hedonic tone. So as we've already learned, the hedonic tone is set by the amygdala and based upon what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching in the environment. Says, okay, you're allowed to be happy because ultimately happiness is a kind of a feeling of being safe. Okay, you're not allowed to be happy because something in your sensory system has picked up in the environment that there is something not safe here. Okay, so in other words, what we're saying is increasing hedonic tone is another way of saying a happier child, right? Happier child also leads to increased stress tolerance. So the child will have an increased ability to deal with stresses that come in, won't be threatened as quickly, won't be threatened as easily. It will take a lot more of a threat and a greater repetition of threat for that child to be put under threat. And they'll also engage in more joyous and playful behaviors as well, right? They're more explorative. They're more likely to kind of, like I said, be less clingy, get away from mum and dad a little bit more, all that kind of stuff. So this is all down to the caring emotion. What else? Okay, so this is important to understand. There are huge hormonal changes in the last weeks of pregnancy. Okay, and particularly the last few days, but in the last weeks of pregnancy. And this is what creates those maternal drives. So that flood of hormones that goes through the mum, right? So, particularly things like the prolactin, the estrogen, and the oxytocin, which are flooding through mum's body at this moment in time. So progesterone is lowering. Kind of prolactin, getting ready for the production of milk, right? So that's one of the things that prolactin does. We'll talk about hormones in a later lesson. But prolactin surges, oxytocin is also surging, and estrogen is surging. And all of these things make mum's anterior cingulate cortex much more sensitive to the baby and makes the baby a much more important addition to her life, okay? Interestingly, in those last few days, clearly everything, as we already know, everything the mum ingests, the baby ingests, right? Which is why far fewer mums are smoking these days. We actually realise that if mum smokes, then baby is getting the smoke. Well, if mum is being flooded with prolactin and oxytocin and estrogen, then so is the baby, which means that from the moment the baby is born, it is also hardwired and attuned to the mother right from birth. Okay, so nature is really, really clever. It's putting all these things together right from the get-go, so essentially to give the baby the highest chance of survival, and to give mum the highest chance of passing on her genes in a way that those genes are going to survive. Nature is really bloody clever. Okay, so reduction of the care emotion. So if we're having less physical contact, if we've got a lot of separation, again, the research is pretty clear on this, right? And as much as it's been a trend for a long time for parents to both sleep separately from their baby, everything from theories around cot deaths and kind of baby illness and rolling over on your baby and all that kind of stuff, the evidence is actually pretty clear that separation from mother leads to increased anxiety, okay? And that increased anxiety has a tendency to lead to poor social engagement. And not only that, the poor social engagement can span across the entire adult life. Bear that in mind. So I'm not just saying it's just down to, you can still have a lot of socialization, particularly if mum kind of gets up, mum or dad gets up in the middle of the night and immediately responds to the crying baby. There was a period in history where it was very en vogue for doctors to actually tell you to actively allow your child to cry. Okay, like don't pander to them, don't go running to them, because if you do, you're just training them to cry out for you, and you've got to train them to kind of be independent. Okay, as it turns out, neuroscience has completely disproven that, because it damages this care emotion, it damages this care system, and leads to greater anxiety and more social problems later on. Okay, but what the interesting thing here is about how long this can last into adult life. I mean, across your entire adult life, from not having enough physical contact, not having mum or dad come to you quickly enough when you start crying as a very, very small baby. Remember, crying is the only means of communication, and it's a way of saying, hey, something is wrong and I'm scared and I'm unhappy. Mum or dad take too long to come and get you. It's another way of saying, okay, I am spending long periods under threat. Okay, so that was the care emotion, and we are going to be coming back to it. Don't worry, all of these emotions we're going to cover in much greater depth. These first couple of lessons are really just about identifying them and understanding a little bit about them. Okay, so let's look at lust. Okay, lust is always a good one for us to look at, mostly just because I'm a man. Just kidding, but no, I'm not. But lust is a great emotion to look at. Lust is, again, one of our base emotions, right? I don't mean base as in it's lower than anything else. I mean it's a fundamental emotion. It's built into us. Everyone has lust as an emotion built in. And ultimately, it's about procreation, the ability to procreate. In other words, readiness for creation, okay? It's about mating and passing on our genes. It's moderated by all the gonadal hormones. So, kind of essentially, we're talking about testosterone and estrogen, okay, in pubescent youths and in adults. So, kind of as soon as we are of an age where we kind of mature down our gonadal roots, where estrogen and testosterone kind of are starting to come into their own, starting to really peak. We do. I'll talk about this later in another lesson, but we do actually effectively have two puberties. Okay, the first puberties are occurring in girls between 6 and 18 months, and in boys between about 9, 15, 16 months. Okay, so there's like a first puberty, if you will, and then there's a second puberty. I'm talking about this occurs during the second level of puberty. Okay, so it's moderated by estrogen and testosterone. And ultimately, lust is driven off the back of vasopressin in males, right? So vasopressin is promoted by testosterone. So if our testosterone levels are high, our vasopressin levels generally tend to be higher. As our vasopressin kind of conversion is higher, we have a higher degree of sexuality and demand for sex. Okay, demand for the physical act of sex. If we're experiencing very high levels of stress hormones, for example, stress hormones depress testosterone. So high stress pushes testosterone down, and if you push testosterone down, you push vasopressin down, which lowers your desire for sex. Okay, not only it lowers your desire for sex, it lowers, particularly in men, obviously because of the need to gain an erection, it lowers your ability to have sex also. So not only does sperm production go down, not only does kind of erectile function go down, but the desire is down as well, and that's all off the back of the stress hormone. So it's really, really important to understand. In women, oxytocin is the kind of the primary driver for the lust emotion. Okay, and oxytocin is driven by the estrogen side of the pathways, again from the gonadal hormones. Okay, and it's exactly the same in females as it is in men. When women are under stress, kind of estrogen levels change, both estrogen production and estrogen delivery is changed, and as that is changing, oxytocin levels go down. Obviously, because women don't have the need to gain a physical erection in order to have sex, it doesn't prevent them from having it, but it's very, very likely to prevent them from conceiving, for example, or is reducing. Again, so a lot of things to look at. Again, this is me more talking about, I guess, from my body map perspective rather than mind map perspective, but some of the things to look at in women that are having trouble with conception is to look at both not only in themselves, their levels of stress, but their partner's level of stress as well. Okay, partner has high levels of stress. Maybe he's not able to kind of get an erection, or even if he is able to get an erection and have sex, maybe he's not producing enough healthy sperm in order to kind of procreate. For the woman, she may be having problems from an estrogen and oxytocin level, making it very, very difficult for her to procreate. Okay, so kind of it's a very, very large area, and stress does play a huge role in both the ability to experience the lust emotion, and then obviously the kind of the main purpose of the lust emotion, which is to procreate, goes down as well. Okay, so other things to look at here is that vasopressin generates the assertive or aggressive tendencies in males, right? So and that's what kind of gives a lot of males the courage, if you will, to move forward and kind of, pop the question and kind of, put the question across that kind of, is sex on the cards tonight? That's what gives males their confidence to actually go forward into that. But it can also be expressed, the negative side of that, the darker side of like males being pushy and even creating that kind of that jealousy. Oxytocin generates sexual readiness postures, right, and kind of an acceptance in females, kind of. And again, when oxytocin is high, when estrogen levels are high, a female is much more likely to want to engage in sexual activity. Okay, these are basically both the vasopressin, oxytocin, the readiness for sex, the lust emotion is naturally developed by and sponsored by both the care and the play emotions. Okay, if you feel care, you feel safe, right? Because that's another word for it. Like, you can't feel care in the absence of safety, it's like it's very, very difficult to kind of to experience. If I'm not feeling cared for by a person, I'm probably not expressing that I'm not feeling safe with this person. If I'm not feeling safe with this person, I'm very, very unlikely to want to open myself up, like in this case, like literally, but to the vulnerability of sexual engagement. Okay, so care is really important, as is the play emotion as well. Okay, so lust is really, really, it's about desire, and it's about positivity. It's not coming from a negative place. Okay, so I've got a lot to say about this in later lessons, but ultimately what we're talking about is if you have high degrees of the other positive emotions like care and play, then the lust emotion generally tends to take care of itself. Okay, when you have low degrees of care, low degrees of play, which are both dependent upon feeling safe in the first place and feeling connection, when you've got low degrees of those things in place, the lust emotion is almost absent. Okay, if not absent entirely. I think I just said that. When care and play emotions are suppressed, so too is lust. So you could say that reproduction is a thrive activity. Okay, it's a thrive activity. Okay, I'm surviving here. I have food. I have shelter. I'm safe. There's nothing about to come and kill me or eat me. Okay, let me go off and procreate. Let me go and spread my genes around and kind of bring some small versions of me into the world. It's a thrive-based activity. Absence of care kind of creates much more of a survive situation from both a brain perspective and from a hormonal perspective. Okay, so now let's look at play. Play is a really interesting emotion. Play is basically, the purpose of play is to promote social exploration, to develop social confidence, and establish social hierarchy in low to no threat environments. Okay, to promote social exploration, develop social confidence, and establish social hierarchy in low to no threat environment. You'll see the common thread there is social. Play is a social mechanism. Okay, and it's a way of actually saying, okay, here's some things that I can practice. Like one day I'm going to be big and I'm going to have to go and approach other creatures, other people that may be competitors for the things that I want. And that is potentially, from a survival perspective, that is potentially dangerous to me. Play is a way of saying, let me get out there and practice these things. And everything from the rough and tumble of kind of parents, especially male parents playing with their children, and especially their male children, is kind of like a safe means of training for combat, right? Clearly, if dad wanted to hurt the little 2-year-old that's jumping all over them, they could, right? And they could do them some real serious damage. And both dad and the 2-year-old understand that, and they know that, right? But dad plays passive, and dad engages in the pseudo fight, the kind of the process of fighting, so effectively training the child like how to use its body, how to dominate space, how to kind of move sort of aggressively but without fear, without danger, so that kind of later on, when it actually has to do that for real, when the boy or the girl has to do that for real, they have some training, right? So play is a form of training, if you will. Okay, like I said, it promotes social exploration. If I'm playing, I'm trying new things because I feel safe. If I don't feel safe, I don't go and try new things. So I don't go and explore. I actually stay close to mum. I don't try new things that are outside of my habit, outside of my pattern. I don't develop that social confidence, and I go and speak to other children. I keep myself isolated and stay near the people I trust and the people that I believe are going to defend me. And I also don't learn how to deal with social hierarchy issues. And if I don't learn how to deal with social hierarchy issues, I'm probably going to be a loner. I'm probably going to be bullied, or kind of feel like I'm being bullied. Or at the very, very least, I'm probably going to go through life feelings of low self-confidence and low self-esteem. Okay, because I don't really know where I fit into anything, and everyone feels a bit higher than I do. So another way of saying it is that play promotes learned social behaviors and bonding. So that another way of putting that is the non-familial bond, right? So there are neurally wired bonding behaviors like mum and baby looking into each other's eyes and having physical contact, and there is love there anyway. You didn't have to learn anything. Nobody had to say something to you and teach you, okay, this is me, I love you, right? It's a very different situation. But as we start to mature and we're going to extend away from mum, we're going to extend away from dad, we have to start to learn social behaviors and social bonding that are outside of our immediate protective family. Okay, and that will also include things like siblings and stuff. And we have to learn that. Okay, it's not something that's inherited. Okay, so I don't know why I've put that slide up twice, but I have. Let's take that down. And it promotes the ability to develop and appreciate and hold on to friendships. Okay, so play actually promotes those things. And in fact, the absence of play, kind of how is it that children come together and they say, oh, this is my friend Johnny, this is my friend Mary, this is my friend Susan, right? Their friend is defined by the other children that they play with. Okay, the other children that they play with, the other children that they explore with, the other children that they kind of practice social hierarchy issues with, the other children that they give things to, take things from. That is actually how they determine who is a friend and who's not. And if someone is too many steps away from them in the social hierarchy, they tend not to consider them a friend. Okay, so our friends are either kind of like a step above or a step below us, or on the same kind of step, if you will, on the social hierarchy. If we're too many steps removed, we don't consider those people our friends. Okay, so if the play aspect is present, if the play emotion is present, we develop friendships and we hold on to friendships. If the play absent is not present, we don't develop friendships and we don't hold on to friendships. It's that simple. Okay, so absence of play is a sign of threat. We only play when we feel safe. Okay, it's a bit like lust. We only play when we feel safe. So care has to be present and threat has to be absent. If care is present and threat is absent, we are prepared to go out and extend ourselves and explore and connect. Okay, there are strong links to antisocial behaviors in the absence of play. So and again, you think about it, if the purpose of play is to teach us how to engage in our social environment and teach us how to understand our place in social hierarchies and teach us how to understand what is acceptable and what is unacceptable socially, then obviously antisocial behaviors are going to creep in the absence of play, right? Excuse me. So a lack of play in children increases the likelihood of stress, it increases the likelihood of anxiety, and it increases the likelihood of depression in adulthood, right? All of those things. So the same things that occur in children, stress issues, anxiety issues, depression kind of issues, that again carries all the way through to adulthood. So play is really, when you really break it down, you really boil the whole thing down, play is an indicator that the care system is working well. Okay, if the care system is working well, we go out into the world and we play and we explore. If the care system isn't working well, and remember, coming back to care, what is the primary essence of the care system? It's making lots of physical contact, making lots of eye contact, responding to the child's threat in within a reasonable amount of time, and being there for them, right? If the child feels that there's the prediction and response that kind of mum and dad are here, they care for me, they provide for me, they look at me, they touch me, they talk to me, they're here when something happens, they're likely to play. In the absence of that, they're unlikely to play because they are constantly vigilant. They're constantly on the lookout for where's mum and dad, where are they going, can I get safe again if something happens here? Okay, so that's only 6, right? I've only spoken about 6 emotions so far. So what about the 7th? Well, the 7th emotion is the seeking emotion. Seeking emotion is an interesting one. Again, it's primarily designed for survival, right? Primarily. That's true for all of our hormones anyway. That's true for all of our emotions and hormones anyway, right? They are primarily designed for survival. So you could put it this way: it's like first for food, then for fun. So if I'm getting my food needs met, then I'm likely to start going out pursuing the fun. And when I say fun, I mean exploration, like looking for new territory, looking for new mates, kind of, and then moving out toward things like the play aspect. Okay, so food, right? Again, if we come back to the 5 Fs of the reptilian brain, right? Kind of, what did we say, right? Fight, flight, freeze, food, and fuck, right? Fight, flight, freeze, food, and fuck, or fornicate if you prefer that, okay? So that is essentially what the seeking hormones are about. They're saying, okay, well, where can I find myself a mate? Where can I find myself food and shelter and all that kind of stuff? Now that I've got that, kind of let me now go out and see if I can expand my territory. Why might I want to expand my territory? I might want to expand my territory so that I can find more food and more mates, essentially, right? On top of that, there then comes the drive for play. Okay, so when your survival needs are met, the seeking emotion promotes exploration, movement, physical stimulation, and play. Okay, so it's dopaminergic, which means that this is the dopamine hormone is primarily at play. So we looked at, with the dark side, we were looking at mostly cortisol and adrenaline, right? So that was the dark side hormones. These are all the fight and flight sort of side of the hormones. Then, as we've started to move down into the care and lust side, we started to look at things like the oxytocin and serotonin. These things become present. This is all about dopamine. Now, the seeking emotion is all about dopamine. And dopamine really activates when you get close to a goal. Dopamine is a seeking hormone. It's like, get up, get off your ass, and go and get that thing. And it doesn't care what that thing is, by the way, right? It's a drive to start taking action on something. And we get our biggest dopamine fix when we get close to goal, as opposed to when we achieve it. Dopamine doesn't spurt when we accomplish a goal in quite the same way as it does when we're approaching a goal. So you could say it's a chase hormone. Dopamine is the hormone of chase. It's the equivalent of, you think about a lion on the Serengeti, right? It's getting a big dopamine rush for chasing down the antelope. But once it catches that antelope, it's not getting dopamine anymore. Right? And it's dopamine that kind of keeps us hungry. It keeps us searching. It's dopamine that is really the closest thing that the brain has to a euphoria system. But the euphoria only really kicks in as long as we're chasing. This is both a good and a bad thing. It gets us off our butts. It gets us moving. It gets us doing things. It gets us exploring new territory, meeting new people, having new experiences, which is absolutely awesome. The downside of the dopamine pathway is that it keeps us kind of in a slightly addictive, compulsive state. As opposed to feeling satisfaction, it perpetually keeps us dissatisfied. Dopamine is really a hormone of dissatisfaction. Okay, so its positive use is action. Like I said, gets you off your butt, gets you engaging, gets you exploring, pushes you out there into the world, kind of trying new things, seeing new things, kind of, well, as long as the dopamine pathway is firing, you are out there ready to kind of go and find out as much new stuff as you possibly can. But the trouble is, there are some overactive issues and some negative issues, right? It creates this impulsivity. We become impulsive. We become obsessive. We become craving, right? So, and again, we also kind of feel this compulsion even in the absence of joy. So now you start to think about, who are people like this? Who are the people that have a seeking and dopaminergic kind of overactivity? And the first thing that would bring you back to are addicts of any kind, including kind of gamblers, drug addicts, alcoholics, and so on and so forth. There's a compulsion to do things. Dopamine is pushing you forward to take action and go and do stuff so that you get your hit of your drug, right? You get your hit of your dopamine, because essentially the dopamine is taking the place of oxytocin and serotonin. If you're not out in the world connecting with other people, you're not getting serotonin. If you're not getting deep connection with other people, you're not getting oxytocin. So how is your brain ever going to get its sort of semi-feel-good hormones? It's going to get them by continuously having you seeking. right? We'll talk about this a bit later in the program, okay? Because it's a really, really important one to understand. But these are also the kind of people who are setting goals all the time and just getting ticks in boxes. Okay, I've got another tick, I've got another tick, I've got another tick. But they never actually stop to enjoy the fact that they accomplished something. As soon as they accomplish something, they're immediately looking for the next thing to chase. Why might that be the case? Because dopamine is pushing them forward. Why might dopamine continuously be pushing them forward? Because they're not getting their oxytocin and the serotonin, which only comes from social connection. Okay, really, really, really important. And again, we will come back to this. Okay, so it also creates this kind of feeling of anxiety when you're not acting. Okay, so it really feels like, oh, well, I've got to do something. I've got to find something new to do, someone new to speak to, something new to happen. I've got to set myself a new goal. I've got to take a new task, right? And again, very often, this is, again, one of the reasons why people are sort of like living from to-do list to to-do list. It's because dopamine is driving them forward. Okay, usually a case of when your social connections have diminished. Okay, so all addictions rise from the seeking emotional system. The seeking system also plays a really important role in the lust and care emotion circuits, right? Kind of, it leads you to seek a mate, and it leads you to seek other people to connect to and care for. Okay, it's kind of like, you can look at the seeking system is not a bad thing at all. Like, I already said this. No emotion is a bad emotion, but one of the downsides of it is it can lead you kind of to the dark side. The seeking system straddles both the dark and the light side. And you can really, really use it. Like, you can use the seeking system to drive you to look for care, to look for love, right? But just as much as you can drive it just to look for new tasks. And it's up to us as coaches, really, to help the client identify when they've got caught up in a dopaminergic seeking cycle. Okay, so yeah, I've already said this. Goal setting without satisfaction, addictive behaviors. Ignore that. So, in summary for this whole thing, remember we have fear, panic, rage. They're the three dark side emotion, right? These are activated when we're out of connection with other people, right? When we're out of connection with others, we experience fear. When we're out of connection with others, we experience panic. When we're out of connection with others, we experience rage. On the other hand, play, lust, and care are all in connection emotions, right? They're in connections. They get activated when we're in connection with other people. If I'm feeling, if I'm seeing, feeling, touching, visual gazing, I'm feeling cared for, right? If I'm in connection with other people, my lust kicks in. If I'm in connection with other people, I want to play. Okay, they all come together. So, and seeking, what does seeking want? Well, remember, seeking is about food first, then fun. Right, that's really how it works. Food first, then fun. Get up, take care of your survival needs first. Once those are taken care of, go and have some fun. We'll talk about kind of, again, all of these in much greater depth as we move forward. But in the next lesson, we're going to start talking about the emotion matrix, right? So some simple questions that we can ask ourselves and ask our clients to help us identify not only what emotion they happen to be in, but why they may be there, and what we need to do and what we need to ask in order to help get them into an emotion that serves them better. Okay, so that's coming up next. So I hope you enjoyed this this particular exercise, this particular lesson. I feel like this stuff is the entire basis of the entire MindMAP philosophy. Okay, so when we truly understand the emotional matrix, when we truly understand the emotional networks, particularly these 7 emotions, this is where we're doing our best work. This is where we're connecting to our clients the deepest. This is where we're making the most difference in their lives. Okay, so go over this several times. Really get to know the dark side, the light side, and the seeking emotions. Really get to know them, and don't worry if it seems a bit cursory at this point. It's because it is. It's actually we're just going over the top of them at the moment. We're about to take a very big deep dive into each emotion, a lot deeper, and gain a lot more understanding about each of them, so that you as a coach can show up in the world and see, experience, and say all the right things to help your clients create their transformation. Okay, so that's coming up next. Till then, take care.